Hello and welcome to the Preserved Word with Pastor Brad from Bright Star Church in Hopkins County, Texas. I hope that you're having a good week. As you can tell, I am doing some surgical work on my studio. I actually moved rooms to combine a few things, give some more space to the church. And so I'm in this room and I've got this cheap paneling behind me back there, which is fine. I mean, it is what it is. But I will get my black curtains up, and which will help with the sound deadening and different things that that's designed to do. I haven't cut everything quite set up the way I want it, but nevertheless, that's not going to stop us from plowing forward. Now, today's subject is I don't know. I found it interesting, but it started out as an accusation. I'm going to call the show Unicorns and Dragons, so you can tell what it's about. It's a criticism of the King James version of the Bible that uses unicorns and dragons, and how this can cause issues and problems, and how we should. Started off with a video that I watched that was and it referenced Mark Ward video. Mark Ward is a guy who is famous for belittling King James onlyists, and he's very what's the word? Well, he's belittling. He's very condescending. That's the word I'm looking for. Oh, they're so cute. There's nothing wrong with them. They're fine. They're our brothers and sisters. They're just idiots, you know. He doesn't, but he does. He very he's very condescending, and he doesn't actually address the issues. At least, James White will talk about textual variants and things like that, and even though James White is sometimes very rude, he'll, at least he's forthright in his opinions of what he thinks about you. I would say Mark Ward is even more extreme in his views, but he's very condescending when it comes to them, and he's he does it in a backhanded sort of way. If you agree with him, then you're listening to him carefully. If you disagree with him, then you're not listening to him carefully, instead of having an issue with actually what he is saying. Well, anyway, that's beside the point. Mark Ward has come up with this term. I don't think he invented the term, but he has coined the term in the use of false friends. Okay, that's why I'm doing this. False friends. And he's saying the King James Version is full of false friends, and that alone, without any textual variants, without getting into manuscript evidence, that alone is reason for abandoning the King James and going to a modern Bible. He doesn't get into the New King James. He doesn't get into any of the Bibles that are written on based on the Textus Receptus. He strictly focuses in on using an ESV, or some modern version of the Bible. And his attack is on this idea of false friends, that the King James, of no fault of its own. It was a fine Bible when it was written, but the English language has changed over time, and because of that, there are left many false friends that can lead you astray if you don't know about them, and you shouldn't have to know about them. So why use that antiquated Bible? Why not use a newer one? We're going to take a look at an issue this morning that even attacks, or even sort of causes a problem with my favorite version of the Bible, which is the New King James. And we're going to take a look at how even the New King James, I think, got this wrong, and why. Now, this is a credit to Nick Sayers. His channel is a good one to check out if you're interested in these subjects. He pointed this out in his, I think his video came out yesterday, and I thought that was fascinating, so I thought I would go ahead and put my spin on it. First of all, let's take a look at the issue. Unicorns, according to Mark Ward, is a false friend. Okay? It is a word that has changed over time in the English language to lead us astray. and to cause so many doctrinal problems. In fact, he called it a major problem with the King James, that we should use a modern version of the Bible without addressing any of the fact that many of the our main issue is that they're leaving out big portions of the Bible and causing and really attacking inerrancy of the Bible. Instead, he focuses on this idea that that because the English language has changed, it leads us to major problems. I mean, he didn't say doctrinal issues, but I mean, he implied that we're going to get the wrong idea about things. Well, so let's take a look at unicorns and dragons. Unicorn is a false friend, according to him, because it lists unicorns in the Bible several different places. I think it's like, 13 times, 9 times, something like that. I don't know. Doesn't matter. This is the King James. This is the King James version of the Bible, and it renders the word unicorn. And there's actually a footnote here, or what they call marginal note in the King James. It's not called a footnote for some reason. It's called a marginal note in the King James, which says, or rhinoceros. Okay. Now, this to me is a non-secular. This is a non-issue to me. If you're reading this, just say you're a 12-year-old and you're reading the Bible and you come across the fact that, oh, wait, the Bible's talking about unicorns. Well, yeah, you're probably going to get the idea in your head that it's talking about fluffy white horses with spirally horns that have magical powers, that poop rainbows and whatever. Okay? Because that's what we in our culture today call a unicorn. But not all of our culture today does that. The official word, the scientific word for a rhinoceros is Rhinoceros unicornus. I mean, that's the so if you're a scientist, you know unicorn as part of what a rhinoceros is. They did this here as well. They translated it unicorn or rhinoceros, okay, which was the word at the time. There were two different words which derive from Latin for describing an animal. Now, the Hebrew word here is reem, R-E-E-M. And that word is a little mysterious, but it does mean one-horned. So what do you do? Well, they translated it unicorn, which, again, I don't think is a problem. Yeah, you're going to get the wrong idea. But look, if we have a lady that comes to our church, a very wonderful lady, by the way, in case she's listening, who is from England, from over there. Actually, I think she's from Welsh. Anyway, she comes from over there, and she might hand you something. She might hand you something from church on the way out of church and say, would you do me a favor, laddie, and put this in my boot? Well, what do you think you're going to do? Are you going to Are you going to tear her boot off and try to stuff, whatever it is in her boot? No, you're going to infer from context. Or you're going to go, I'm sorry, where? In the back of my car, the boot. Oh, the trunk. Gotcha. Okay. You're going to infer from context because we do that all the time. We have to do that in English because we have so many words that are exactly the same that mean different things. When you're reading a book and you come across the word W-I-N-D, well, it depends on the context whether you're going to pronounce that wind or wind, right? In other cases, the word to, or it's a preposition to, or it's an also to, right? We just infer from context all the time. It's what we do. And when you read the Bible, not only are you going to have to infer from context, which we're going to get to in just a second on the word unicorn, but you also sometimes you have to look up a word. Now, and this is the case in everything that you read. I mean, yes, if you buy a book that is written for 8th graders, let's say what was that famous? Let's say Harry Potter. Let's just get Harry Potter. So let's say you're in 12th grade and you decide, I'm going to go ahead and read those Harry Potter books that my young cousins are reading in middle school. and you pick up Harry Potter, you're probably not going to have to look up much. I don't know. I haven't read Harry Potter. But it's written for an 8th grader and you're a 12th grader. So probably the words the author chose to use don't have a lot of words that you're going to have to look up. But let's say you try to read Lord of the Rings. Now you're going to have to look up some words. But let's take any serious book. I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird. That's just, what was that, 50 years ago, maybe 80 years ago? But you're still going to have to go look up some words. What was that? What did that mean? So this isn't new to us. Anytime you're reading a book, especially if it's not a fluff book that's written for somebody maybe younger than you, you're going to have to look up some words. Unless you're just really an avid reader and have a huge vocabulary, then you're gonna have to. It's just the way it is. So when you combine those two things, inferring from context and having to do a little research every once in a while, fine. Now, if you were to read this in this particular place in Isaiah 34:7, if you were to read this word unicorns, you might get that idea that it's a fluffy, you might continue reading, go, oh, wait, look at that. The Bible talks about unicorns. Maybe they were real at some point. Maybe there were really unicorns. These mythical, magical animals that walk around and talk to people in the cartoons today. But let's look at another passage that actually describes a reem. Okay, let's go there. So let's go, and we're going to go to Job 39:9. Oops. I said 29:9. I think I meant 39:9. Pretty sure. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So here, as we know, part of this discourse, this is God asking some rhetorical questions. The answers to these questions are no. Okay, because he's trying to show how great he is compared to Job. And he says, and you can read the context of all of 39 and see that, can you put a nose ring in the Leviathan, which is another, what is a Leviathan? But here he's talking about the unicorn. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee, or abide in thy crib, live in thy house, live in your house where you live? Well, no. Okay. The answer is no. So well, that doesn't, that's okay. And then can thou bind the unicorn with a band in the furrow? And now this is, you have to look up what a band in the furrow means, but that just means with ropes. Can you put him on with ropes and keep him in and make him plow something, basically? Keep him in order, keep him in the furrow of the valley or whatever. And then he says this, or will he harrow the valleys after thee? In other words, plow. Okay, that's what that word means there, plow. Will you trust him because of his strength is so great? Now, wait a minute, if we're talking about little horses, that are this tall and are fluffy and talk to people and create rainbows, this is obviously describing some different kind of creature here. Or will thou leave thy labor to him? Wilt thou believe him that he will bring home the seed and gather it into the barn? And then he goes on to talk about a different animal. So it's like, what is going on here? I may have to go look up what this is talking about. And so when you look up this word back then, you would have found a rhinoceros. Kind of makes a lot more sense. Rhinoceros unicornis. Okay. Makes a lot more sense for this animal. Okay. Now let's read it with the idea that this is a one-horned ox, which is what the literal meaning of the word means. A one-horned ox, a rhinoceros. What is a one-horned large beast? Okay, not an ox. And we're going to get into this. Again, an ox today to us means one thing. That's something that does pull a plow, right? An ox is something that pulls a plow. An ox is like a big cow that people use to pull their wagons and their plows and that kind of stuff. Okay, but the literal meaning here is more like one-horned beast, one-horned giant beast. Okay, and there's a couple of animals it could be. It could have been. There's another animal it could be that's extinct now. It's called a giant. It was called a giant something. It had a name, but that doesn't matter. Let's just read it with rhinoceros and see if it makes sense. See if we can, if we infer from context, what's another one-horned animal? Well, the only one-horned animal I know of is a rhinoceros. Let's see if that makes sense. Will the unicorn be willing to serve? Will the rhinoceros be willing to serve thee or abide in thy crib? No, there are no domesticated rhinoceroses. No one throughout history has ever tamed a rhinoceros in order to serve human beings, and no one has ever had one in their crib that we know of that's ever been able to have one in their house. They'll tear it up, right? They'll just go through the wall. They don't have the mentality for that. Can you bind a rhinoceros with a band and a furrow? Well, no, he won't stand for it. Or will he plow the fields? No one has ever used a rhinoceros, as far as I know, as far as history is concerned, to plow fields. That might be good at it if you could tame them, because they're very powerful, but they're not. They don't. It's not what they want to do. They're not given to that, okay? And will you trust him because of his strength? Because his strength is so great, you know. Of course, he could crush you with just one step, you know, or hurt with that big thick neck of his. That's how they attack, was that huge muscles in their neck on that horn. I mean, they can pretty much destroy anything with that because their muscles are so strong, and the lever there is just incredible. So, I mean, they're just tanks, and they're low center of gravity. The muscles, the short legs, all those kinds of things. They're just incredible beasts built for kind of one thing, and that is to lift you up on that horn. Will you trust them in the great strength? Will you leave your labor to them? Of course not. Will you believe them, or will you trust them to bring home the seed? No, they're not hauling a wagon or bring it into the barn. No, not going to happen. So there you have it. So there's that, the look at inferring from context to see, well, wait a minute, if this could also be a rhinoceros, it sort of makes perfect sense. Is the unicorn a false friend? Well, yeah, in the sense that you could read it and get the wrong idea if you just accept it without context, and if you just go off that. But that can be with anything. Look at the word band right here. Band has more than one meaning. Does this infer that this unicorn has a musical instrument, troubadours that follow him around playing while he walks or something? No, we know that with a band in the furrow, we know we're talking about something that goes around him, right? When you have you say, this is my wedding band, you mean this one actually. That means something, right? Where's your wedding band? You're not asking about the band that played at the wedding. You're asking about the ring that was supposed to be on your finger. So we infer from context. We can get a false friend if we take it without context, or if we take it without doing a little research or thinking it through. Of course, we can get the wrong idea. I mean, anybody could say, "Where's your wedding band?" And you go, "Well, I don't know. I hadn't seen them since the wedding." I mean, but that's not using your intelligence, is it? They're saying, you're going to look right down to your finger and go, "Oh, I don't know. I must have left it on the counter when I was putting lotion on or something." Whatever. Well, so let's go to the newer versions of the Bible, which I don't actually have. I need to go over here and open it, I guess. Oops. Let's open. Let's see. Well, I don't even really have to go to the NASB, but let's do that. New American Standard. We'll go down to verse 9, and it has wild ox. And this reference is for more scriptures. It doesn't say rhinoceros. So, according to Mark Ward, if we read the word unicorn, it's a false friend, and we're going to get the wrong idea. But will we get the right idea from wild ox? Absolutely not. In fact, we're going to get the wrong idea. This is not a false friend. This is a fake or incorrect interpretation. Because wild ox doesn't fit the context of the passage. Let's just read the passage in the New American Standard and see what it says. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Yes, if you tame him, he will. So you're not getting the right answer. A wild ox can be domesticated, and they don't have to be born in captivity. You can take a wild ox and domesticate it. Did you know that? You can. So the answer to this question is not necessarily no, as to all the other questions in Job 39. So something's wrong here. And of course, the something that is wrong is that an ox is... Now, if you're talking about a wild ox and you're referring to the rhinoceros, because technically you could say that a wild ox is also, a rhinoceros is also a wild ox if you're referring to the word ox as beast. But if you're talking about modern culture, we don't think of ox as beast. We think of ox as a particular animal, right? An oxen, right? A water buffalo, something like that. Something that has a wildness to it, but can also be, I don't even know if water buffalo is the right, can be, I don't even know. Don't get me into husbandry of animals that in Asia. I don't know. I know the rhinoceros is from Asia. One-horned rhinoceros is from Asia. Anyway, so we get the wrong idea, or at least as much of the wrong idea from wild ox as we do from unicorn. Because both the word ox and unicorn have changed over time. The difference is this contains less information. This doesn't tell you that there's one horn. This just says wild ox. Okay? If you were going to be more accurate, you could say untamable beast might be the best, modern English translation. It's going to be a literal kind of thing. But even the best would be a one-horned untamable beast, which again leads us right back to rhinoceros. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will he spend the night in your manger? Yeah, of course. Not as a wild beast, but here's the thing about the ox. They are bred to what? Are they bred to attack? No, they're bred to eat. I mean, wild ox purpose naturally is to eat. So you even take a wild ox and put him in a pen with a trough full of food in front of him. He may freak out for a minute, and then he's going to go start eating food. The answers to these questions are not wild ox, even though he may not be tamed to pull a plow. That takes a little more training, a little more domestication. But he's certainly going to be able to stay in your house because they kept their animals in their house back then, which, of course, you wouldn't know unless you did a little research. But will he spend the night in your manger, or whatever, in your barn, in the place where you keep the animals? Yeah. Yeah, you take a wild ox and you put him in a pen, you put some food and some water in there for him. He's fine. She is fine, excuse me. Well, you don't separate her from her calf or something. She might go crazy then. Can you bind the wild ox and furl the ropes? Yes, people have been doing that for thousands of years. That's what they call domestication. Yes, that's how they get things done. So you get my point. Wild ox is not a good interpretation. Now, the problem is, for me, is that, I love the New King James. That's just sort of the version that I use. Well, guess what it has in Isaiah? Wild oxen. Yeah. And the same thing in Job. And what really kind of bothers me, and this is just full disclosure, just to tell you that, just full disclosure on what's going on. I just want to be honest. I have no reason to lie because I'm just after the truth. And so I'm just going to tell you, even when it doesn't match up with what I wanted to say, I would rather the New King James people have put in unicorn or rhinoceros or one-horned beast, or even if they were going to translate it wild ox, why not put a footnote in here saying that it could be rhinoceros or one-horned beast? Or why not put a footnote here telling me that? The New King James is so good about putting footnotes, but they dropped the ball right here. And I don't know why. I don't know what the reasons is for that. But nevertheless, the idea that the King James is creating some type of false friend, whatever you determine that, by using the word unicorn here is not it may be true, but it's just as false to say wild ox. In fact, it's less accurate to say wild ox because there's no one horned about it. There's no one horn there. It doesn't really lead you to what it's talking about. And it's just as probably even I would say it's a bigger false friend to say wild ox because wild ox is a real thing. Whereas any 14-year-old reading the Bible would know that unicorn is a mythical animal that we've made up in the last 100 years or 200 years, however long it's been since we started talking about magical unicorns, as horses and stuff. Magical horses, people always talk about unicorns flying, but that's from My Little Pony. I mean, unicorns didn't fly until very recently. But as far as I know, anyway, I'm not an expert on mythical unicorns. But my point is that calling it a wild ox is actually more misleading than calling it a unicorn, because any adult reading this would know a unicorn is a magical beast. That's not what they're talking about. They must be talking about something else. Let me do some research. Let me go look it up. Whereas if you're an adult reading wild oxen, you're not going to question it. Oh, it's talking about a wild ox. Now, you might question it if you read it into context, if you're going back to Job and go, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense. A wild ox can't be tamed. This is a weak argument by God. Why is he making this weak argument? You see what I'm saying? So there's that. So that's unicorns. So let's take a look at dragons, which I even like more. Dragon is really, in the King James, is only used in Revelation. So let's go to Revelation 22. It's chapter 20, verse 2. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan. Let's go to the New American Standard. We'll go to Revelation 2:20. We have, I'm sorry, it's 22. There we go. Chapter 20, verse 2. And he laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So you see here that dragon appears in both the King James and the New American Standard. But yet, that's the same sort of change that has happened with unicorn, is that dragons are mythical beasts that have mythical power. But that, of course, is the same situation. That hasn't always been the case. Dragons were always written in antiquity, were always written about as real things. Real giant beasts. I tend to have the opinion that they were dinosaurs, that they were remnants of dinosaurs. They were large serpents. In fact, the word meaning, the literal word meaning there is, I looked it up. Did I put it over here? No. There we go. A fabulous serpent. So fancy serpent, you might want to say. But it just means a grand serpent, right? Or a supreme serpent, that kind of thing. So the word itself is actually not translated to an English word, dragon. It's transliterated because the Greek word is drakon. And it's merely just transliterated into English. But it's not, dragon is not an English word. It's a version of the Greek word, drakon. Okay? So, again, dragons were fancy serpents. Now, my personal take on this is that they were the dinosaurs, remnants of the dinosaurs, that people would go out and slay. And when you read the descriptions of these dragons, from antiquity, not from the Bible, but from antiquity, you see that they were large reptiles that they would use to protect their area or their city, but then they would end up eating everything, and they would get out of control, and you'd have to go kill them. And they weren't easy to kill, and so the people who killed them were heroes and that kind of thing. And of course, this leads into mythology of particular individuals. This guy who slew this dragon in this part, but they're also talked about by historians of the time that are not talking about magical things or not to they're not writing something for entertainment purposes. They're trying to record something, and they would say that there were dragons in this area, or there was a famous dragon over here, or something like that. But they're not talked about as mythical beings. They're not talked about as mythical beings until you get up into the medieval age, when they would really romanticize the chivalry and the knights and that kind of thing. And they begin to give the dragons some magical powers and stuff. The tradition for a dragon being able to speak to humans, of course, is from the Bible. It goes back from Genesis. So let's look at that. I thought that was, I thought there was a reference there to it, but I guess not. So I think it's Genesis 3. Yeah, right there. Okay. Now the serpent, this is the King James, so it doesn't have dragon here. But now the serpent was more subtle than any of the beasts of the field which God had made. And he said to the woman, and he quotes, and he talks to the woman. So he speaks to the woman. So this idea that a dragon can talk comes from the Bible, but there's only one dragon in the whole Bible that talks. Okay, there's also a donkey that talks, but there's only one of those too. And that, those were specific. The donkey was a specific miracle of God that was to deal with Balaam. But this instance, of course, is Satan himself. He is a fallen angelic being. So, but he's described as a dragon. He has the form of a fantastic serpent. So. But the other dragons in the Bible don't talk, we're mentioning dragons in other places. And the word dragon, again, only occurs in Revelation. But in Job, for instance, it talks about a serpent that has breath like fire and that kind of stuff. And it doesn't talk. So you've got that going for you. Now, the NASB does list, I think in Genesis 3, if I'm not mistaken. No, it doesn't. But it does list, let's see. Let me go back to here, and we'll just search. Because I did this earlier in my research. Yeah, so Nehemiah, it talks about a dragon. In Isaiah, it talks about a dragon. And again in Isaiah. So there's 3 different listings there for dragon in the New American Standard. Whereas in the King James, these listings are a serpent. And of course, these are Hebrew words, not the drakon of Greek. So that's why that's why it got translated differently. Let's just look at one of these, Nehemiah 2:13. Let's look at that, see what it does with it. Nehemiah 2:13. I don't really know. I don't think I've looked at this. Oh, it does use dragon. Then why did it only come up with... That's interesting. Okay, so, and it went... Maybe I searched it in the New King James. Isaiah 2:12 in the New King James. Did I mess up? It's possible. Yeah, serpent. Here it is. The gate of the serpent. Capital S. Serpent well. Okay. The King James does have it as Dragon Well, and the New King James has it at Dragon's Well. So, and then this is he will kill the dragon who lives in the sea. So this is also talked about as Leviathan, the dragon that lives in the sea. Let's see what King James does with Isaiah 27. Let's just see. Isaiah 27, Leviathan. Okay, so you have Leviathan there in the King James. So, Job 41 also talks about the Leviathan. So there you have these unicorn and dragon mentioned in the Bible. Both are sort of the same thing. They're both words that have changed in the English culture over time, where now they represent mythical, magical beings. When they were written in the King James Bible, they were not. They were not. The unicorn meant a one-horned beast, a rhinoceros, or the other creature. I forget the name of the other creature, but there was this anyway. It's now extinct. But nevertheless, there you go. And the dragon was the same thing. The dragon was just a large, fancy serpent, but it didn't mean the magical, mythical beast that it does today. It was a real thing, okay? And those things have changed over time. Now, Mark Ward's point is that the unicorn is a false friend that you're going to get the wrong idea from. Why not dragon? The new versions of the Bible translate dragon as dragon. So you're going to have to do research either way. There's no reason to throw out one Bible over the other, except that one Bible has all the preserved Word of God in it, and one Bible has some serious textual issues. And then if you want to look at unicorn as a wild ox, you've even got more problems there. So again, don't listen to these critical text guys who are putting you down, calling you ignorant for trusting in God's Word. We are not ignorant for trusting in God's Word. We don't need to be scholars and go to school for 10 years in order to trust that God can preserve His Word, God has preserved His Word, and He has delivered it to you. Stand on it. It is trustworthy. And I hope that that's what you're getting from these messages. And I hope that you have a good week. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.